Right now, at this exact moment, a signal is traveling away from Earth at the speed of light. It has been traveling for decades. It carries the fingerprint of everything we are: our radio transmissions, our television broadcasts, our military radar, our satellite communications, an expanding sphere of human noise moving outward through the galaxy at 186,000 miles per second, growing larger every moment, touching new regions of space every single day. We never decided to send it. We just made noise, and the universe carried it outward. And somewhere out there, right now, that signal is arriving at star systems we have never observed, planets we don't know exist, and whatever might be living on them. We have been broadcasting our location for over 100 years, and in all that time, across every frequency, across every direction, across the entire observable universe, we have received nothing back. Not a signal, not a pattern, not a whisper. Just silence, so complete and so absolute that it has its own name in science. The Fermi Paradox. The question of why a universe this old, this vast, this full of the ingredients for life has produced no detectable sign of anyone else. Most people who encounter this question assume the answer is distance, or time, or the difficulty of communication across interstellar space. Those are comfortable answers. They let you sleep. But there is another answer, one that a small number of physicists and theorists have been sitting with for decades. One that doesn't let you sleep at all. What if the silence isn't absence? What if it isn't distance, or time, or the difficulty of radio waves crossing light years of space? What if the silence is deliberate? What if every civilization that has ever existed in this universe, every species that ever looked up at the night sky and wondered if anyone else was out there, eventually figured out something? A rule, a truth about the nature of the universe and the cost of being known inside it. And what if every single one of them, upon figuring it out, made the same decision? To go quiet, immediately, completely, permanently. And what if we are the only ones who haven't figured it out yet? That idea has a name. It is called the dark forest theory. And once you understand it, once you really follow its logic all the way to the end, you will never look at the night sky the same way again. Let's build it from the ground up. Because to understand why the forest is dark, you first have to understand what kind of universe we actually live in. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Earth is 4.5 billion years old, which means that for over 9 billion years before our planet existed, the universe was already running. Stars were already forming and dying. Heavy elements were already being forged and scattered. The conditions for life were already present in countless regions of the galaxy long before the first amino acid assembled itself in some ancient ocean on this pale blue dot. The Milky Way alone contains somewhere between 200 and 400 billion stars. Estimates suggest there are at least 100 billion galaxies in the observable universe. The numbers are so large, they stop meaning anything to human intuition, but what they imply is almost impossible to argue against. If life can arise on Earth, if chemistry can organize itself into biology in one place in this universe, then the probability that it has done so nowhere else across 13.8 billion years and hundreds of billions of galaxies is so small it approaches zero. Life almost certainly exists elsewhere. That is not a controversial position among scientists. The controversy is about intelligence, about complexity, about whether the particular chain of events that produced creatures capable of building radio telescopes and asking questions about the cosmos is common or rare. But here is the thing. Even if intelligence is rare, even if only 1 in a billion life-bearing planets produces a technological civilization, the numbers still produce thousands of civilizations across the observable universe. Possibly millions, possibly more. And given that the universe had a 9 billion year head start on us, many of those civilizations would be incomprehensibly older and more advanced than we are. So where are they? That is the Fermi Paradox in its simplest form. The universe should be full of civilizations, and it appears to be completely empty. The silence is not what the math predicts. The silence is the anomaly. Now, here's where most explanations stop. They catalog the possible reasons. Maybe life is rarer than we think. Maybe interstellar travel is impossible. Maybe civilizations destroy themselves before they can expand. Maybe they're communicating in ways we can't detect. These are the standard answers, and they all have merit. But none of them explain the completeness of the silence. None of them explain why, in over 60 years of systematic searching, we have found absolutely nothing. Not even the faint, unintentional signature of a civilization that had no idea it was broadcasting. The universe should be leaking signals in every direction. And it isn't. Which brings us to 1977. August 15th. A volunteer astronomer named Jerry Eman is reviewing data from the Big Ear Radio Telescope at Ohio State University. He is scanning through pages of computer printout, looking for anything anomalous in the radio frequency data. And then he sees it. A signal so strong, so structured, so precisely matched to the frequency that scientists had theorized an extraterrestrial transmission would use, that Eamon circles it on the printout and writes a single word in the margin. Wow. The wow signal. 72 seconds of transmission that came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. A signal that bore every characteristic of what a deliberate extraterrestrial broadcast would look like. It was never explained by any natural phenomenon. It was never detected again. Despite dozens of attempts to relocate it using far more powerful equipment, the sky in that direction has been silent ever since. One signal. 72 seconds. Then nothing. Most scientists classify it as unexplained. A small number quietly wonder if the explanation is the one nobody wants to say out loud, that it was a transmission, that whoever sent it detected our search, and that they went dark the moment they realized they had been heard. That thought lives at the edge of the dark forest theory. And to understand why it might be true, you need to understand the two axioms that the theory is built on. The first axiom is this: every civilization needs resources to survive and expand. Energy, matter, space. The universe contains a finite amount of these things, and the universe is moving towards entropy, toward a state of maximum disorder where usable energy becomes increasingly scarce. This is not a theoretical concern for civilizations billions of years old. It is an existential one. Resources are limited, and every civilization that exists is competing for the same finite pool. The second axiom is this: you cannot reliably determine the intentions of a civilization you have never met. You can receive their signals. You can study their technology. You can make inferences about their biology and their history. But you cannot know with certainty whether they are benevolent or hostile, whether they would trade with you or consume you, whether contact would mean cooperation or annihilation. And in a universe where the cost of being wrong is extinction, certainty matters. Put those two axioms together and follow the logic wherever it leads. If resources are finite and every civilization is a potential competitor, then the existence of another civilization is always a potential threat. Not necessarily an actual threat, but a potential one. And if you cannot verify their intentions with certainty, then the potential threat can never be fully dismissed. No matter how peaceful their signals seem, no matter how long you observe them from a distance, you can never be certain. And if the cost of being wrong is your civilization's complete annihilation, if the consequence of trusting the wrong species is that everything you are and everything you've built is gone, then the rational calculation becomes horrifying in its simplicity. Strike first, or hide completely. A civilization advanced enough to cross interstellar distances is advanced enough to end you before you can respond. The only protection against a threat you cannot assess is to ensure the threat never knows you exist. And the only way to ensure that is silence. Complete, permanent, total silence. This is the Dark Forest, a universe where every civilization hides in the darkness, weapons ready, terrified of making a sound. Not because the universe is full of monsters, but because in a universe of finite resources and unknowable intentions, every civilization is a potential monster, including you, including us. The forest isn't dark because nothing lives there. It's dark because everything living there knows that light attracts predators. And we have been shining like a beacon for 100 years. Now here's the question that the Dark Forest raises that most discussions never reach. If this theory is correct, if the silence is the result of every advanced civilization independently arriving at the same conclusion, then at what point did they figure it out? What was the moment? What did they learn or experience or discover that made the decision so obvious, so unanimous, so permanent, that not one of them has broken the silence since? Because here is the terrifying implication. Whatever that knowledge is, whatever the rule is that every civilization figures out and then immediately goes quiet, we don't know it yet. We are still in the period before understanding. Still in the phase where we broadcast enthusiastically into the darkness without knowing what the darkness contains. And somewhere out there, the civilizations that figured it out are watching us do exactly what they once did, before they knew better. There is a concept in Fermi Paradox research called the Great Filter. The idea that somewhere between the formation of a planet and the development of a galaxy-spanning civilization, there is a threshold that almost nothing survives crossing. A filter so lethal that it eliminates civilizations before they can leave a lasting mark on the cosmos. The question that determines whether this concept is terrifying or merely sobering is whether the filter is behind us or ahead of us. If the Great Filter is in our past, if the extraordinary series of evolutionary steps that produced intelligent life on Earth represents the bottleneck that most planets never get through, then we may be genuinely rare. Special. One of the few that made it past the hard part. But if the Great Filter is ahead of us, if the thing that destroys civilizations is something that every civilization eventually encounters after reaching our level of development, then the silence takes on a completely different meaning. It means that every civilization we would expect to hear from has already hit the wall, already been filtered, already ceased to exist, or been reduced to a level of technology that cannot broadcast across interstellar distances. And we are approaching that wall right now. Look at what we have built in the last 100 years. Nuclear weapons capable of ending civilization dozens of times over. Artificial intelligence systems whose long-term behavior we cannot predict or fully control. Biological engineering tools that could, in principle, produce pathogens of unprecedented lethality. Climate systems already destabilized by a single century of industrial activity. The list of existential risks we have generated in the brief window between discovering radio waves and now is extraordinary. We have invented more ways to end ourselves in 100 years than in all of the preceding 200,000 years of human existence. What does a civilization look like at 1,000 years of technological development? At 1,000,000? At 1,000,000,000? What does it build? What does it accidentally release? What does it do to itself and its environment with tools we cannot yet imagine? The silence may be the answer to that question, written not in words, but in absence. Every civilization that reached technological maturity either destroyed itself or learned, at enormous cost, that the only survival strategy in a dark forest is to stop making noise. In 2007, astronomers began detecting fast radio bursts. Incredibly powerful, incredibly brief pulses of radio energy arriving from cosmological distances. each one representing more energy than the sun produces in decades, released in milliseconds. Their origin was unknown. Their pattern was irregular. Most have now been attributed to natural phenomena: magnetars, neutron stars, exotic astrophysical processes. Most, not all. A small number of fast radio bursts have arrived in repeating patterns that natural explanations struggle to fully account for. One source in particular, FRB121102, has produced hundreds of bursts from the same location, something that no currently understood natural mechanism cleanly explains. Scientists are careful. They categorize it as unusual and continue studying it. But the question that lives underneath the careful language is the one nobody wants to ask directly. What if some of these bursts are not natural? What if some of them are the energetic equivalent of a civilization doing something, building something, powering something, communicating something, so vast in scale that it leaks energy across the cosmos the way our radio transmissions leak into space? What if we have been detecting the industrial exhaust of civilizations so advanced that their byproducts register as astronomical events? And if so, why haven't any of them ever sent a deliberate signal? Maybe they already know the answer to that question. Maybe they learned it the same way every civilization eventually learns it. The hard way. If you find yourself unable to look at the night sky without thinking about what might be looking back, if these are the questions that belong to you now and refuse to leave, then Cosmora is exactly where you need to be. Subscribe and stay. The universe has more to show us, and very little of it is comfortable. But before we close, here is the thought that will follow you out of this video and into the dark. The forest is real. The logic is airtight. The silence is not absence. It is the accumulated decision of every intelligence that came before us, made independently, arrived at separately, and acted on unanimously. They all went quiet. Every single one. Without exception. Without coordination. Without any communication between them. Just the same conclusion, reached alone, in the dark, by every mind that ever became advanced enough to understand what the dark actually contains. And here is what that means for us, right now, tonight, on this small, loud planet, still broadcasting everything we are into the silence. We are not alone in figuring this out. We are simply the last to figure it out. And somewhere in the forest, at a distance we cannot measure, in a direction we cannot determine, with capabilities we cannot imagine, something has already heard us. The question that has no comfortable answer, the one that belongs to you now and will not let go, is not whether they heard us. It's what they decided to do about it, and why we haven't found out yet.